Have you ever felt like people already decided who you are, before you even had a chance to prove anything? Like the outcome of your life was predicted in advance. Maybe they didn't say it out loud, but you could feel it. The doubt, the low expectations, the subtle look that says, they probably won't make it. And strangely, after hearing that enough times, something even more dangerous starts happening. You begin to believe it too. Not completely, but just enough to hesitate, just enough to second-guess yourself, just enough to wonder, what if they're right? And that's where the real problem begins, because losing doesn't usually start on the outside. It starts quietly inside your head, a small voice that says, maybe I'm not the type of person who wins. Now here's the part nobody likes to admit. Most people never lose because they lack talent. They lose because they slowly accept the role of the underdog, without realizing they've accepted it. Think about that for a second. When you believe the world expects you to fail, something subtle happens. You stop taking big swings. You play safe. You avoid risks. You prepare for disappointment. And before you know it, you're living a smaller version of your life, not because you couldn't do more, but because you assumed the ending had already been written. Be honest for a moment. Have you ever caught yourself thinking something like, people like me don't usually succeed at that? Just notice that thought, because that sentence alone has stopped more dreams than failure ever did. Now here's something strange. History is full of people who were underestimated. Athletes nobody believed in. Entrepreneurs laughed out of rooms. Artists rejected hundreds of times. And yet somehow, those are often the exact people who end up changing everything. Why? What do they know that most people don't? Hold that question for a moment, because the answer is more psychological than you might expect. And it starts with a quiet realization most people never make. When the world expects you to lose, you actually gain a hidden advantage, but almost no one uses it. Instead, they absorb the doubt. They carry it around like extra weight, and slowly it drags them down. But every once in a while, someone does something different. Someone hears the same doubt and turns it into fuel. Not anger, not revenge, fuel. Now imagine this for a moment. You're standing at the starting line of your life. Some people around you already look confident. They have support, resources, encouragement. And then there's you. Maybe fewer advantages, maybe fewer believers, maybe a long history of people expecting less from you. At first glance, that sounds like a disadvantage. But here's where the story gets interesting. Because sometimes the people who start behind develop something others never do. Relentless focus. The kind of focus that only appears when you've been underestimated long enough. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt a quiet urge to prove people wrong? Not loudly, not dramatically, just a deep internal feeling that says, one day they'll see. If that thought has ever crossed your mind, you're not alone. In fact, that thought has powered some of the most successful people in the world. But here's the twist. The real power isn't proving them wrong. It's proving something to yourself. And this is where things start to shift. Because the moment you stop obsessing over other people's expectations, you start focusing on something far more important. Your own standards. Now think about this carefully. When someone expects you to win, the pressure can be heavy. But when someone expects you to lose, you gain something unexpected. Freedom. Freedom to experiment. Freedom to fail. Freedom to grow without constant judgment. But this is the part most people miss. Instead of using that freedom, they waste energy trying to convince doubters,
arguing, explaining, defending themselves. And none of that changes anything. Because doubt is rarely logical. It's emotional. People believe what they've already decided to believe, so trying to change their mind first is the wrong strategy. And this next realization might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's also incredibly freeing. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to become the kind of person who keeps going anyway, even when the room is quiet, even when the support is missing, even when nobody expects anything special from you. Because the truth is, most people quit long before they reach the point where everything changes. But here's where the journey takes a surprising turn. Because the biggest obstacle in this entire story isn't the people doubting you. It's the moment you start doubting yourself. And the way to break that pattern is not what most people think. In fact, the real shift begins with something incredibly simple, but almost nobody does it.
At some point, the doubt stops coming from other people and starts coming from you. Quietly, subtly. You might still say you want to succeed. You might still dream about a different life. But inside your head, a second voice starts whispering things like, maybe this just isn't for me. I tried before. People like me don't usually win. And that voice sounds convincing, not because it's right, but because it feels familiar. Now here's something most people don't realize. Your brain is not designed to chase success. It's designed to protect you from disappointment. Which means the moment something feels risky, your mind starts building a case against it. You'll suddenly remember every past failure, every embarrassing moment, every time something didn't work. And the brain quietly says, let's not go through that again. Sounds reasonable, right? But here's the problem. If you always listen to that voice, you never reach the version of yourself that exists on the other side of discomfort. Now think about the last time you almost tried something bold. Maybe starting a project, maybe changing your career, maybe speaking up when you normally stay quiet. Right before you acted, what happened? Most people experience the same internal moment. A pause, a hesitation, a mental negotiation that sounds something like this. What if this fails? What if people laugh? What if I'm not good enough? And suddenly the safest option feels obvious. Don't try. Stay where you are. Protect your pride. But here's the strange part. That safety slowly becomes its own kind of trap. Because every time you choose comfort over growth, you send your brain a message. This is the limit. And over time, your mind starts believing that limit is real. Now let's pause for a second. Think about this honestly. How many opportunities have you quietly talked yourself out of? Be honest. Does that question feel a little too familiar? Most people won't admit this part, but a huge number of failures in life never actually happened. They were canceled before they even began. And this is where the underdog mindset starts becoming powerful. Because when people expect you to lose, you stop worrying about looking perfect. You stop chasing approval. You stop trying to impress everyone in the room. And suddenly, something interesting happens. You start playing the game differently. Instead of protecting your image, you start focusing on progress. Instead of proving you're already great, you focus on getting better. And that small shift changes everything. Now here's where things get real. Because improvement is rarely dramatic. It's slow, quiet, almost invisible at first. You practice, you learn, you fail, you adjust, then you repeat. Most people quit somewhere in that cycle. Not because they're incapable, but because they expected faster results. But the underdog who keeps going begins to build something dangerous: momentum. And momentum is one of the most powerful forces in personal growth. At first, it's small, a tiny win, a new skill, a little more confidence, nothing impressive. But then another win appears, and another, and suddenly you realize something surprising. You're not the same person who started. The person who once doubted themselves is slowly disappearing. And the new version of you? They're getting harder to stop. Now here's the part most people never see coming. When you start improving quietly, the same people who once doubted you begin to notice. Not immediately, but eventually. Your actions start contradicting their expectations, and human brains hate contradictions. So people react in strange ways. Some become supportive, some become curious, and some become uncomfortable, because your growth forces them to rethink the story they told about you. But here's the funny part. By the time they notice, you're no longer trying to prove anything. You're simply focused on becoming better, day by day, step by step. But wait, because the next realization is the one that truly changes the game. It's the moment you understand something most people miss their entire lives. Winning isn't about beating other people's expectations. It's about rewriting the expectations you have for yourself. And once that shift happens, your entire mindset starts evolving in a way that surprises even you.
Something strange happens the moment you stop trying to prove people wrong. At first, that might sound backward. After all, the entire idea of the underdog story is proving the doubters wrong, right? But stay with me for a second. Because the people who truly rise above expectations eventually discover something unexpected. The real battle was never against the doubters. It was against the version of themselves that believed the doubt. And once that version begins to fade, your entire relationship with success changes. You stop chasing validation. You stop imagining the moment where everyone finally claps for you. And instead, you become quietly obsessed with something far more powerful. Progress. Not attention, not approval. Progress. Now think about this honestly. How much of your energy has been spent worrying about what people think? Will they judge you? Will they laugh? Will they think you're trying too hard? It's exhausting, isn't it? And here's the ironic part. Most people are far too busy worrying about their own lives to think about yours. But our minds don't see it that way. They imagine an invisible audience watching every move, critiquing every attempt. And that imagined audience keeps people small. But here's where the shift happens. One day, something inside you gets tired of living like that. Tired of shrinking. Tired of playing safe. Tired of asking permission from people who never gave it anyway. And that quiet frustration turns into a decision. Not a dramatic one, just a simple internal shift. I'm going to try anyway. Now, pause for a second. Have you ever reached that moment? That strange mixture of fear and determination? Where you know something might fail, but staying stuck feels worse. If that feeling sounds familiar, you're closer to the turning point than you think. Because courage rarely looks heroic in real life. Most of the time, it looks like a person doing something small, while feeling completely unsure. But here's the part nobody tells you. Those small, courageous actions slowly reshape your identity. The first time you speak up, it feels terrifying. The second time, slightly easier. The 10th time, it starts feeling normal. And eventually, you realize something surprising. You're no longer acting brave. You've become someone who is brave. Now think about that transformation. At the beginning of this journey, the world expected you to lose. Maybe you even expected it. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, just through repeated choices. And that's the real secret behind most overnight successes. They're built on years of quiet persistence nobody saw. Now, here's a question that might feel uncomfortable. If nobody judged you,
If nobody doubted you, if failure wasn't embarrassing, what would you try? Seriously, take a moment and think about it. Because hidden inside that answer is the direction your life has been quietly pointing toward. Most people already know what they want to try. They've known for years. But fear convinced them it wasn't realistic, or responsible, or possible. So the idea stayed locked away. But something interesting happens once you begin acting despite doubt. Your brain starts updating the story it tells about you. Instead of saying, "I'm not the kind of person who does that," it slowly begins saying, "Maybe I am." And that sentence is dangerous in the best possible way. Because once you start believing a new identity, your actions begin matching it. Now, here's the moment most underdog stories reach their turning point. It's not the big victory. It's not the applause. It's the quiet realization that you're no longer the person who needed approval to begin with. You're simply someone who keeps moving forward. And that mindset makes you incredibly difficult to stop. But wait, because the final shift in this journey might be the most powerful one yet. It's the realization that winning isn't what most people think it is. And once you understand this part, you'll never look at success the same way again. Here's the strange truth most people discover at the end of the underdog journey. Winning isn't the moment everyone finally believes in you. It isn't the applause. It isn't even the success people see from the outside. Winning happens much earlier. It happens the moment you stop needing permission to try. That's the real turning point. Because once you reach that point, the entire game changes. At the beginning of this story, the world's expectations felt heavy. People doubted you. Maybe they underestimated you. Maybe they quietly assumed you'd stay exactly where you started. And for a while, that doubt felt personal. It felt like a judgment about your potential. But over time, something subtle began to shift. You stopped measuring yourself by their expectations. You started measuring yourself by your own growth. And that shift is powerful. Because when your focus moves from proving people wrong to improving yourself, the pressure disappears. You're no longer performing for an audience. You're evolving for yourself. And strangely enough, that mindset often leads to the very success people doubted in the first place. But by the time it happens, you're not chasing validation anymore. You're simply living differently. Now here's something interesting about human psychology. The brain loves patterns. If you repeatedly act like someone who keeps going, eventually your mind accepts that identity. I'm the kind of person who doesn't quit. And once that identity locks in, your decisions become easier. You try things others hesitate to try. You recover faster from failure. You keep moving when most people stop. And over time, those behaviors create results. Results that once seemed impossible. But here's the funny part. From the outside, people call it confidence, or talent, or luck. They rarely see the quiet journey that created it. They don't see the early mornings, the doubts you fought through, the days you almost quit but didn't. All they see is the outcome. And suddenly, the same people who once expected you to lose start telling a different story. They say things like, "I always knew they had potential," which, if you're being honest, is a little ironic. But that's how human nature works. People update their beliefs after they see proof, not before. And that's why waiting for universal belief is such a dangerous strategy. Because if you wait for everyone to believe in you first, you might wait forever. The people who win despite doubt understand this. They don't need early applause. They don't need constant encouragement. They simply move forward, step by step, day by day. Now pause for a moment. Think about the version of yourself you could become if you stopped worrying about proving people wrong. What if your focus shifted completely? Instead of thinking, "I'll show them," you started thinking, "I'll build myself." Do you feel the difference? One mindset is reactive, the other is powerful. Because when you build yourself, skill by skill, habit by habit, lesson by lesson, something remarkable begins to happen. The gap between who you are and who you want to become slowly disappears. And that transformation becomes visible to the world. But the most important change happened internally long before anyone noticed. You stopped seeing yourself as the person who was underestimated. You started seeing yourself as the person who kept growing. And growth is very difficult to stop. So the next time you feel that quiet pressure, the feeling that people expect less from you, remember something important. Other people's expectations are not predictions, they're just opinions. And opinions are often based on incomplete information. They don't see your effort. They don't see your potential. They don't see the version of you that hasn't appeared yet. But that version is there, waiting for the moment you decide to move forward despite doubt. Because the real victory isn't proving the world wrong. It's refusing to let the world decide who you become. And if this idea felt familiar, if part of this journey sounded like your own experience, don't just let it pass by. Think about the direction your life is moving right now. Ask yourself a simple question. Are you living according to other people's expectations or your own potential? Sometimes the biggest change in life begins with one quiet decision. The decision to keep going, even when nobody expects you to win. And if this message spoke to something inside you, stay around. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to give up on the person you're becoming.